Like, I think it is ridiculous and disgusting and pathetic and cringy and creepy for someone like Matt Walsh to say, you know what? An adult has no right to make a decision what to do with their body regarding if they want to pursue certain medical procedures. I would fight that tooth and nail. That's bullshit. Yeah. Okay? But when it comes to kids, it's a fundamentally and categorically different issue. Yeah. Like, you know, and if you say, well, that's just, I'm really on Matt Walsh's side and all this. Like, trust me, I'm not.
No, I know. And you made your major video. I guess it wasn't Matt Walsh.
I think he's probably the person I've gone after, a single individual most.
Yeah. And you did the other video, but it was Michael Knowles, right? Who said, like, let's exterminate the trans.
It said, talk about eradicating transgenderism. Yeah. Which is, you know, and people say, oh, like, there's no, you know, there's no trans genocide and this is all extreme term. And it's like, yes, obviously not right now, but that is the language of genocide and disgust. And it's like, that concerns me. And, you know,
you know, I just, I don't know.
Which is fair enough. You don't know. You can't
No. But what I'm saying is that I'm
telling you what I believe.
I'm saying that when social change comes to town, there is a certain person.
Social change is always in town.
Whose disposition is to be wary and skeptical and critical of those making the proposals.
Right, and that's not me at all. I'm advocating for mandatory civil service.
Well, I mean, I think that sort of some of the most challenging forms of social change comes from, you know, historically marginalized groups that are sort of demanding rights that become intrusive to the culture and rhythm of life that the majority has become accustomed to, right? And I feel like, you know, the trans issue is the most recent manifestation of a story we've seen play out many times in the past, where sort of like a previously marginalized group begins to sort of assert itself in the culture. And a lot of people react with disgust and revulsion at this upsetting of the quote unquote way things are supposed to be in the natural order of the universe. Right. And I feel like, you know, I can totally concede that you have some nuanced opinions on this, but I definitely feel like the incentive structure that you inhabit as a commentator is probably pushing you in the kind of more demagogic anti-trans direction.
I'll just ask you this straight up. Do you think it is wrong to surgically remove the breasts of a 13-year-old girl for the purposes of gender or sex reassignment surgery?
I don't know. I honestly do not know. I think that this is an issue that involves a very small number of families.
True.
I think it involves questions of identity that are hard for outsiders to adjudicate.
True. And certainly identity is a very complicated issue nowadays.
And it's like, you know, part of it is informed by my experience as a gay man as well. And, you know, the experience that I had coming out of the closet and being open, and the degree to which sort of, you know, I faced people. You know, I was born in the 1980s. So like I grew up in a time that was relatively homophobic and a time when it was not uncommon to hear people say that gay people are faking it, or they just want attention, or it's a phase and they're going to, like, you know, I had even some of this kind of stuff with my own family, you know, the sort of the lack of understanding of who I was as a person and being my true self, and getting people to take seriously the expression of your true self. So there's a part of me that is a little sort of perhaps personally allergic to those who come around and tell individuals or families that they know what's best for them and that the decisions that they make as a family are somehow wrong, right? Especially when we're already having like just such a robust conversation in general in the culture, you know, whether it involves, you know, vaccines or anything else, you know, abortion, what
you just said is more than reasonable. The reasons that you just gave for why you are sympathetic or why you're not quick to hop on I say that double mastectomies for teenage girls, I say that's degenerate and disgusting. And I believe it's important to do that, because it's true. Yeah. Right? In my opinion, I guess, to the degree that these things are just opinions. Yeah. But if sane people in the center do not call it out for what it is, then it's the Matt Walshes and the Michael Knowles who say, let's eradicate transgenderism. They're the ones who everyone goes, you know what? These are the people who are the loudest advocates against this crazy shit going on with kids, which, like, fair enough. Yeah. There's there's a deeper discussion about the medical literature surrounding it. I've looked into it. I've done videos on the studies.
I mean,
they're
it's such
utter
a
bullshit.
It's such a new phenomenon, though. Like,
among other issues that are there. But there's almost a separate issue of like, it's not even about the medical data. It's because like,
it's just like,
I don't want to go down this.
But it's like what I would say though is that I feel like our personal revulsion for something is not necessarily the strongest argument against it, and that we should be wary.
Yeah, but sometimes it is.
Sometimes it is.
Yeah, like there's a. Yes, I mean, like there's a reason we regard. We're gonna have to use YouTube-friendly terminology here. Yeah. But there's a reason why child involvement, involvement between adults and children.
Yes.
Like we shouldn't have to rationalize. Well, can you cite a study that suggests that this is a?
No,
that's just bad.
Yes, I agree. But at the same time, for example,
hold on.
Yes.
To my point about sane people in the center.
Yes.
You'll notice it's the far right people who say. To be transgender, to be gay is to be that. Yes. And it's like, no, you fucking moron. That's bullshit. But if they're the only ones who are calling out the actual nonsense relating to children undergoing irreversible surgery, then that gives them credit that they shouldn't have. That's my point.
Yeah, I mean, right? It's definitely, but it is fundamentally like, pardon me?
It is complicated.
Well, but again, like Philosophy Tube, the YouTuber, did a video on this once, and they made a comment that I thought was pretty persuasive, where she sort of said that I think she was like in medical school or something, and she once watched a surgery like where they opened up some guy's ribs with the rib spreaders and like how gory and horrific it was, and it's like that's grotesque and monstrous, but at the same time, like we can recognize that it served a useful function.
Yes, I agree. Just because you find something disgusting is not.
And I just feel like a lot of this, of this kind of stuff is just the argument is fundamentally, this is gross and weird and not normal, and therefore government should put a stop to it. And I don't know, it's just like, it would be interesting to talk to some of these families and hear their story and hear these voices, right? And not just like the most unattractive, unsympathetic case studies that we can possibly find, which gets so amplified in the right-wing media, people that have transitioned and regret it, these kinds of things, right? Like if you listen to, because that's what I think a lot about. It's like, I was thinking about this the other day. It's like to put yourself in somebody else's shoes is really a very important aspect of trying to have any sort of reasonable political conversation. Right,
which is why even though I regard this as an obvious, it's pretty clear, it's a pretty easy softball. Hey, it's wrong to cut off the breast of 13-year-olds. The reasons that you just gave, I'm like, okay, that's fair. That makes sense. So I agree with you.
Yeah.
Not in the...
No, but it's like, I don't know, but it's like, but I say, it would be interesting to just hear some of these families tell their story. There's not many of them. That's also worth noting. Somebody pointed out the other day that more underage girls get boob jobs than boob removals. So like, that's sort of something that's worth keeping in mind as well. Like this is ultimately a very small subset of the population. And then we have to have some degree of faith that like, or at least err on the side of assuming that if a family is going to do something this dramatic, well, maybe they have, their own reasons for doing it that aren't necessarily assisted by strangers intruding.
Perhaps the argument about autonomy of family decisions could be made for gay conversion therapy. Should a family have a right to make that decision with their doctor? We say no because gay conversion therapy is clearly
quack science,
right? And that's and I bet my life and everything I don't have a reputation, but I bet everything I have socially on the fact that it is pseudoscience bullshit that is being pushed, or all the studies that claim that children do not experience regret. Adults, the science is much clearer, I believe. To the degree that I've looked into it for adults. I actually take a lot of it for granted that it works for adults.
Yes.
It's the studies with children that I've actually looked at or whatnot.
I mean,
and again, it's not conflating the rights of adults. And there are even cases where I think puberty blockers could be administered to children.
Yes.
Ken Zucker, who, notorious transphobe Jordan Peterson, Peterson said he likes Zucker's method of how he handled it with children, where it was a wait-and-see approach. There are some kids who, from like 3 years old, experience gender dysphoria their whole life. there may be cases where, okay, puberty blockers, they have been administered.
Yes.
And it was only recently brought to the right wing's perspective because of all the other crazy shit.
Yeah.
But like, if we can't draw a clear moral line on a 13-year-old with no prior history of gender dysphoria, like until they were 11 or 12 or something like that.
Okay, let me
clearly
tell you.
There's an effect of social media.
Yeah.
And social contagion is the technical term.
Yeah. Let me tell you the true centrist position on all of this, right? And I do sort of think
this is the dark centrist position. Okay. The enlightened centrist with this background is here. Okay. The dark centrist.
So the dark centrist position on this would be that like one kind of compromise solution that is very rarely discussed, and I think for reasons that will become clear, is that if we just had a society that was a little bit more comfortable with gender fluidity, right?
Totally.
You know?
Agreed.
Like if we had
just because you play with toys or play with Barbies when you're a 5-year-old boy or whatever doesn't mean you're literally a female. You don't need to have your sex changed.
Yes.
We could just accept that everyone is non-binary. Everyone, and I mean that, everyone has masculine and feminine aspects. Yes. There are feminine men, there are masculine women, and there's a spectrum.
Yes.
All of this medical intervention underneath it doesn't make any sense. That's my point.
Yeah, and I think that the problem then is that the right wing does not want to concede that point, right? Like the right wing simultaneously does not want people to get gender reassignment surgery at any point in time. And the right wing also does not want to see boys wearing dresses. They don't want to see they, them pronouns.
Wrong. Hold on.
Yeah.
Partly wrong. Depends on what you mean by right wing. Matt Walsh, absolutely. That is why Matt Walsh is the right-wing dweeb. When I think of left-wing dweebs and right-wing dweebs, left-wing dweebs are Antifa goofballs and all these like crazy particular gender ideologue activists and all that. Matt Walsh is on the other side.
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson very clearly articulates the case for how androgyny or men, having like feminine clothing and all that stuff can actually be a very sophisticated personality type. All of the Mick Jagger and David Bowie and all these people, all these rock stars that I think classically masculine men they dressed up in feminine clothing. That didn't mean they were literally female. That's the point.
But the thing is that when you look at sort of the right-wing commentary class these days.
The far right.
No, not even the far right. Like you look at sort of mainstream conservative people like Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens. Like they spend a lot of time.
I would put Candace Owens pretty close to she's middle far right.
Okay, but anyway, the point is like
depends on how we use these terms.
The Daily Wire
far right means
well, even
Nazi.
Even like the Fox News crew, for instance. Let's sort of take them for an example, right? Like there's a huge obsession with this idea that like men aren't masculine enough these days, women aren't feminine enough these days, and we're going to like really sort of gender police all sorts of gender expressions. You know, Harry Styles wears a dress on the cover of Vogue, and this is sort of seen as the downfall of Western civilization. Like there's a lot of this kind of like bullying people into gender conformity, and that's bad because then if you want to have an alternative path to gender expression that doesn't involve medicalizing it, that doesn't involve surgery, you have to be able to create spaces where people can play with gender and be free, particularly when they're young.
That's what I believe.
No, that's good.
That's my point. Right. And that's why I'm against the medical aspect of it for children.
Yeah.
Because they should be free to do whatever their internal self identity and exploration wants to do. That's healthy for development.
Have you seen this? This kind of like meme on Twitter where it's like the fellas, is it gay too?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. There's all kinds of.
But again, it's like
cultural meme stuff.
Bringing it back to you specifically, though, it's just like to what degree do you spend time talking about? We need to have a society that's more comfortable with gender fluidity versus how much time do you spend bemoaning the fact that people are getting...
I will make you a bet for $100 Canadian dollars.
Okay.
I believe in 80 to 90% of every video that I have made related to this topic.
Yes.
I specifically say something to the effect of gender is a social construct, masculine and feminine, that has to do with behavior. And sex is the underlying binary reality.
Yes.
We should be free to move around on the social aspect, masculine and feminine, but male and female, if we're going to do drastic, irreversible medical intervention there, that should be reserved for adults who are giving informed consent. I talked to a transsexual clinical social worker, the National Social Worker of the Year, I think in 2018, 2019, 2020, somewhere around there, Xander Keeg, who born a female, now has a very thick beard. You wouldn't be able to tell
Yeah.
that he was born a female. I have no problem referring to people by the pronouns that make sense in terms of appearance.
Yes.
And for people who say, you know, oh, you shouldn't call Blair White a she because you're lying. It's like, well, she looks like a fucking woman, so I'm going to call her that. And Dylan Mulvaney looks like a man, so I'm calling him a man. So either side who wants to impose on my language can go fuck off. That's my opinion.
Dylan Mulvaney is a woman.
What was I just ranting about that was leading up to that?
You were talking about gender expression and the degree that you talk or don't talk about this.
Yes. Yes. So, yeah, Xander Keeg, who I refer to as he.
Yeah.
He is a social worker who had to give informed consent letters.
Yes.
He specifically stated, like, they're very complicated, and it's to suggest that a child, their parents shouldn't be making those irreversible decisions for their child. The child should have to understand it. And I don't believe a 13-year-old has the capacity to read an informed consent letter.
Okay. So
having to do with
the amount of time that we have spent talking about this relative to the amount of time we've spent talking
I don't
about
like
other
the fact
things.
that you said I was transphobic. I generally I don't give a shit about those type of terms, but coming from you, who, you know, at least is willing to come here and have this conversation.
Yes.
It is the lesson that I have learned is that I clearly need to do a better job of speaking to the valid points you just made. Although, again, go back to our bet. I believe in virtually all my videos. I make that very clear.
Yeah. But again, what I would just sort of say is that if you feel equally passionate about both sort of dimensions of your position on this, then I feel like when we look at your output, we should see you spending equal amounts of time talking about those specific parts of the argument. Like equal amounts of time denouncing underage gender reassignment surgery as you spend equal amounts of time talking about why we need a more gender fluid
Going
society.
after Matt Walsh?
Yeah.
That's what... All right. All right. I will take this information into account. What you need to do is you need to go back and watch those videos related to that, because I'm doing exactly what you're saying, which is
I remember the Michael
It gives me
Knowles
confidence
video.
that we are aligned on this more so than it might appear.
Yeah.
What do you want to talk about?
What
now?
else? What else do you have
listen,
in your...
there's I feel like globalism versus nationalism is a whole separate thing. We've got 20 minutes, right, Spider? Do you want to talk about anything? I mean, I've got some stuff, but
I want to hear your stuff. You're the MC.
All right, I've already said this, but in this folder, I have information that will lead to the arrest of Hillary Clinton.
Need a second joke, Paul.